Welcome to Windy Night Stories. Tonight's story is one by Joan Aiken. An L-shaped grave. The artist's name was Luna Knox, and the show of sculptures was being billed simply as self-portraits. And it was being held in a most inaccessible part of town, thought Maurice Hart, the art critic, staring irritably out the dirty train window at monotonous rows of suburban roofs slipping past with their dank December gardens and gray leafless trees. One of the houses, to Hart's mild wonder, had a moose head attached to its wall, the kind of trophy usually to be found indoors in hunting lodges and baronial halls. How very singular to set it up out of doors, he mused. But then it occurred to him that a moose is, after all, an outdoor animal, accustomed to life in the wild. The oddity, really, is in fetching the beast inside four walls. Another house, a short distance further on, had a sign, Mathematics Lessons. Call 339-9966. How many rail passengers would be in need of math lessons and would trouble to call that number, activated by a sign seen so briefly through grimed, rain-streaked glass? But many people, he supposed, traveled to and from their work along this piece of track 10 times every week. To them the moose, the math lessons, must be an accustomed part of their daily ritual. Gresham Common, Lordsfield, Crittleworth, and now the track, taking a wide curve on its raised embankment, circled back toward the river, into a region that must once have been tidal marshes, but now, long reclaimed, held docks and warehouses. Ancient rusty derricks loomed among grass-grown, littered trackways and half-derelict buildings. The district was, in fact, being transformed yet again, as waterborne trade took to the air and shipping sadly declined. Now the spacious, lofty warehouses were being converted into art galleries and artist studios. Rents were soaring, and ships' chandlers' stores were experiencing a new lease on life as expensive boutiques offering frivolous, impractical luxuries and exotic trifles in the place of their formerly sternly utilitarian wares. The principal virtue of the new goods offered for sale was that they could be billed as ethnic. The actual source of origin was of little importance as long as it was from somewhere overseas. Hopford Dock. Maurice Hart stood up, buttoned his raincoat, and with considerable reluctance left the warmth of the stuffy carriage. Hopford Dock Station was no more than a halt, a one-walled shelter with steps leading down to the unexplored wilderness below. Dusk had already begun to fall, though it was hardly past 3 on a disagreeable afternoon. Hart wished that he could have come by car, but an unfortunate drunk driving episode had rendered him subject to a 3-month ban. Hoisting his shoulders, turning up his collar, he strode out along a roadway bordered on both sides by the bulky rectangular shapes of storehouses or factories. How to find street names in this derelict area? Impatiently he hurried on, occasionally consulting a small conventional map printed on his card of invitation, realizing with added annoyance that he might as well have quitted the train at the previous stop and saved himself a walk. There was the house with the moose, getting sleeker with wet all the time. At last he came to a street sign, Rope Walk, and was able to orient himself. He took a left turn, then a right, and suddenly found himself among people and lights. Brilliant shop windows were filled with glistening swaths of fabric, dazzling pyramids of crystal, colors that appeared to seethe and bubble as elixirs might in the alchemist's crucible. The people in this thoroughfare, which had apparently been closed to wheeled traffic, were all young. Their clothes ran to the wildest extreme of contemporary taste. They wore huge hats, high-heeled boots, shawls, turbans, hodies, breeches, serapes, bustles, cloaks whose gaudy hues throbbed like the music of tom-toms in the dusk and drizzle. "Is this Watergate Lane?" Hart asked. "I'm looking for Crane Galleries." "Right there, man, right ahead of you." And in the same moment he saw it, a wrought iron sign that, in eccentric lettering, spelled out the word Crane up the side of a narrow, lofty building. Hart showed his card after passing through a massive glass door that opened for him automatically, then signed his name in a book that lay on a large metal barrel. Behind the barrel was what appeared to be an organ constructed out of monumental steam pipes and valves left over from some discarded piece of machinery. He noted this with slight disapproval, and proceeded through an inner door into the gallery itself, where he was immediately handed a large glass of red wine. So far so good, he thought dryly, sipping the beverage, which, he must admit, was not bad at all, powerful and with an excellent bouquet. The building was full of people, yet so very large that the crowd was of little more importance than acorns on the floor of a forest. The place had been a warehouse once, the ceiling, almost out of sight, supported by mighty cast-iron pillars with filigree ornamentation and Corinthian capitals. These, and the walls and ceiling, had been painted stark Arctic white, and the floor, composed of some hard, resonant wood, was polished to an Arctic glitter. Yet the enormous bare room was not cold, nor was it noisy. The voices of the guests became muted, soft, and awestruck as they strolled and wandered with glasses in their hands. Tiny sparks of red light, reflected from the wine in the glasses, moved and flickered on the white walls. The light came from lustres which were hung, rather frivolously and eccentrically, on 20 to 30 pairs of deer's antlers, which had been suspended on white ropes high above the guests in the exhibits. These were what Hart had come to see, and what he noticed last. Yet once he had taken them in, he ceased to observe anything else at all. The white walls, the large mirrors on the walls, the monumental white pillars, the black lumpy shapes of the crowding people, the red flashing reflections, all sank through his mind like salt dissolving in water. The pieces, of which there might have been 20 or so, were from 6 to 7 feet high, and they had been constructed, Hart read, consulting his card, from epoxy, cloth, and bronze or aluminum powder. The cloth had been somehow impregnated with the glue and powdered metal, then coaxed into folds and drapings and left to harden. The material, thus stiffened, suggested the outline of a figure inside, but the figure was lacking. Here was a cloaked, hooded, massive woman, but the space below the brow band of the hood was vacant, merely a dark hole. No eyes looked out. Folds of gray cloth conveyed the shape of a breast, a nipple, but a slit down the side of the robe, from armpit to ankle, showed dark emptiness inside. Draperies blown back on a ship's figurehead outlined a graceful torso, but, stepping behind this figure, Hart found it to be concave at the rear, no more than a hollow shell. "Hey, Hart, me old son," said a voice in his ear. "What do you think of them?" And turning, he saw the face of a fellow critic, a man called McDougall, who wrote a weekly column for the Sunday Landmark. "What do you think?" McDougall repeated. "Not bad? You gave the girl a real pasting last time, didn't you? Heroic groups, wasn't it? All made out of hemp?" "These are better, clever," admitted Hart, a shade reluctantly. "Frozen motion. Not a new idea, but she's done it capably, I must admit. But you don't feel there is an element missing? And I don't mean just the bodies inside," he added defensively. "What then? What's between light and dark, between moonbeams and sunshine?" "Much too philosophical for me, old boy," said McDougall, clapping him on the shoulder. "And you'd better not speak too loud. The lady herself is somewhere about. I saw her just now." "Oh, I've never met her. What sort of age?" "Hard to say. She might reasonably feel she has a grudge against you after what you wrote last time. I've heard she can be quite tough with fellows who get on her bad side. You'd better give her a nice boost this time." "Can't promise," snapped Hart. "I can only say what I think, can't I? I came to her flaming show, didn't I? And a nice trip I had of it all the way out to this god-forsaken spot. Anyway, I don't wholly dislike them. They're better than that last lot, at least. There's something a bit mysterious about them." Then he realized that McDougall had stepped away, and that he was addressing instead the back of some female in a black dress who stood with her head turned away from him. Her hair was black, too, and there must have been yards of it, enough to reach to her ankles if it had been let down. But it was coiled and plaited into an intricate structure, a kind of coronet on the back of her head, and 2 long, twisted locks fell on either side of her face. The face, he now discovered, was dimly discernible to him in the mirror on the wall beyond her. He could see sparks of light reflected in her eyes and some kind of sparkling crescent pinned on the crown of hair. She began to speak without turning around, and, from her tone of mockery, he supposed that her words were intended for him. "So you actually came all the way out to this god-forsaken spot, Mr. Hart, did you? And you like these better than the last lot? I wonder by which god do you suppose this spot was forsaken, Mr. Hart? By Apollo, perhaps? Or by Wotan? Or Allah? Or Jehovah? Oh, it's just a matter of speech, you know, he said uncomfortably. Am I right in guessing that you are Luna Nox? The pieces are quite original. You heard me say there was something mysterious about them. Yes, and something missing as well. I wonder what that something can be, Mr. Hart. Still she went on admonishing him in the glass with her back turned, and he exclaimed angrily, I wish you would turn around and talk to me properly. This is an idiotic way to hold a conversation. You wish that I would speak to you directly? Oh, but that wouldn't do, Mr. Hart. That wouldn't do at all. No, I fear you must look for me in the mirror. I very much fear that if you looked at me directly, something unfortunate might happen. People have been blinded who stared into the naked light of the sun, Mr. Hart. Perhaps that is why I leave something out of my works. No, I am afraid you might find the sight of my face much too disturbing. With a furious exclamation, he laid his hand on her shoulder and pulled her around to face him. Heads turned in the crowd at the clatter of broken glass and a series of cataclysmic screams. Startled guests jumped aside as Hart, flailing with his fists, staggering, made his way to the lobby and out through the automatic doors, which mockingly parted to permit his exit. All the way along the street his shrieks continued. My head! My head! Oh, God, my head! When he was picked up, at the end of Watergate Lane, he was clasping his temples with both hands as if to control intolerable agony, and he had grown a full-size pair of elk's antlers. It was thought his death must have been caused by a brain hemorrhage. The antlers were so large, indeed, that it was necessary to dig an L-shaped grave in order to accommodate both him and them. The end.